Test, test.
Commissioner Anderson, before we start, we're having a plaque made for Commissioner Lugo, but we don't have a plaque for him currently. So you may just want to introduce him so members of the public know. Perfect.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the June 4th, 2025 Cottonwood Heights City Planning Commission Business Session meeting. I'll start with asking if there are any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest to disclose. Great. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and move forward. We'll start with general public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone to make comment about an item not on the agenda. Is anyone here for that? Okay, seeing none, I will close the general public comment period. The first item that is listed on the agenda that was published was Project CUP 25004. That project has been withdrawn. So that's not one that we will be discussing. The next item is Project ZTA 25001, a public hearing and potential recommendation to City Council on the city-initiated zoning text amendment to modify language within Chapter 19.37 Neighborhood Commercial.
Thank you. I'll go through our proposed changes briefly here for the benefit of the public in attendance. As a result of the moratorium on live work uses in the neighborhood commercial zone imposed by the City Council in February, the city has now up to 180 days to better define and provide provisions related to the live work use type. And this proposed text amendment is staff's attempt to try to do that. So I'll go over those changes briefly. I've done this in a couple meetings now and in the work session. So stop me if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'll try to kind of go through this quickly. We are proposing to eliminate the following codified conditional uses in the neighborhood commercial zone: bed and breakfast, home occupations, although those will be back in a different way, home preschools, planned unit developments, residential facilities for elderly persons, and live work spaces. We are then proposing to amend or replace the mixed residential housing use, which is defined a little bit better than live work, but not a whole lot better, with a new use type that tries to consolidate all these things into one that meets the intent of the neighborhood commercial zone, called neighborhood mixed use. This would allow an allowance for residential housing within a mixed use project in the neighborhood commercial zone, but only as a component of that project. And then in addition to that, we've created a definition for neighborhood mixed use that will be codified within the city ordinance. And then we've created some draft standards that would apply specifically to neighborhood mixed use projects. Those being that neighborhood mixed use project may include a residential component, but it would also have to include one of the other non-residential uses listed in the neighborhood commercial ordinance. All development standards pertaining to height, setbacks, landscaping, parking, coverage, all of those things would still apply. Whether it's neighborhood mixed use or just some other use in the NC zone, the same standards apply. The mix of uses shall be consistent with the listed permitted and conditional uses in the neighborhood commercial chapter. Again, also allowing a residential component to that. And then specifying that the non-residential portion of a neighborhood mixed-use project shall constitute at least 25% of the total gross floor area of the entire unit or the total project if the uses are spread out on the site. And then at least 50% of the unit or project frontage at ground level along a public right-of-way is dedicated to the non-residential portion of the project, making sure that non-residential component has a prominent presence on the public right-of-way. It's accessible to the public. It's set up, to be a successful commercial use. And then while not directly a result of the live work changes, we are also proposing a few other clarifications, removing minimum lot size, width, and depth requirements in favor of just allowing building height and setback and parking and landscaping and buffer and screening setbacks to dictate what can be built and to what extent. We feel like that's a more reasonable way to do that. And then modifying the height requirements instead of what it says currently, which is 2 stories or 35 feet, whichever is less, strictly regulating based on maximum height of 35 feet. So those are our recommendations. This is based on public input we've received, conversation and discussion with the City Council and also with the Planning Commission. This is a legislative item, so your vote as a commission is a recommendation that will then go on to the City Council and go through a similar process there before anything is final. Any questions for staff? Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now open up the public comment period for this particular agenda item. As a reminder, the time limit for comments is 3 minutes, and it is not a dialogue. So just if you will state, just to set expectations, it's not a dialogue with the Planning Commission or with staff. So is anyone here for public comment for this agenda item? And if you'll state your name, we'd appreciate it.
Nathan Anderson. Thank you for having me. It's hard to fit it in 3 minutes, but I'll try. I'm here to ask for mercy for our property that I do own, that I did purchase. To diminish the development rights of the property it's hard. It's very difficult. We bought a property that we felt had great development rights and potential at the time that we purchased it, but when I brought a project here, and I understand the city does not like live work, and it was kind of a fiasco, and so I got out of that. And I came back and I had a meeting with the mayor and the council person, Ellen Burrell. And in short, they said, do what's in the code, do what's in the ordinance, you'll be fine. They said it'd be nice to have some modest priced housing. And they said it would be nice to have some owner user community commercial that serves the purpose of the immediate community. We've done both of that. We've been working in the background to do that. All of this is commercial along the front. I gave this information to the community development director. I hope that he has given it to you so you can see that we have been working in the background to do that. We amassed a group of people to do that. The result of it is that the commercial real estate brokers that we talked to said this property doesn't work because it's not a prime location. If we were on a corner, if we were where the gas station is for Smith's, that would be a completely different thing, but this is an off-prime property. So I would ask that you give us some time to make this application here in front of you, that you could either grandfather this, that's hard to say, to grandfather this in, because I am the poster child for the change. I'm it. I'm the one. And to either grandfather this property in or table this, or either break the components apart, not just 25% of the gross floor plate, because one size doesn't fit all. And so if you could have a non-prime, a prime, maybe 25%, and you could have a non-prime that would be off the corner or off the focal point to be 16 or 20%. Because we already have a hairstylist that wants this eastern unit here, to do their job down here and to have their office and supplies up here. And that's what we have to focus on, because we can't compete with other office space, because there's too much B and C office space throughout Conwood Heights and throughout the county that's just sitting vacant. It's very inexpensive. And then the commercial people said, we tried to get, okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other public comment for this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comment period for this agenda item. We'll now move to Planning Commission deliberation, which we've had considerable amount of for this. Is there additional deliberation, comments, or questions?
I think that the staff did some incredible research, especially with adjacent communities and overall just understanding definitions and, creating a neighborhood commercial component and, the background behind that. I know that a lot of time and effort in the last 6 months has gone over that. And there's been 3 or 4 different renditions just for the public to understand of this specific text amendment within this space. So my comfort level with the way that it's looking is very good right now.
Great, thank you, and I'll ditto those comments. Thank you. Anything else? Okay.
I'll just add, I think these are such unique pieces throughout the city, and so I appreciate that we've tried to craft something that was going to meet a lot of different needs, with different densities. But I do think that the preponderance of the space that we're talking about, this would meet those needs. I appreciate the legwork that staff has done to just go back to the intent of what we would like to see happen here. And I think it decreases a little bit of that guess what we're thinking situation that I think we found ourselves in. So I +2 to the document as it sits with the edits from staff.
And just to add to that, this is an interesting gateway to buffer commercial to residential. I mean, neighborhood commercial was that buffer. The intent of neighborhood commercial was to have a nice transitional piece. There's not many sites within Cottonwood Heights that is the neighborhood commercial component. So we have to be incredibly thoughtful about how those lay out and ensure that the intent is represented by the code. And I think that this is a perfect example where we did see some disconnects in the intent not being represented by the code. And I think that this is, properly done, truly.
Great. Thank you for those comments.
Can I just add one as well? I just feel a need to express my my sympathy to a landowner who came to the purchase of a property with what we would all agree are unclear expectations. I think what we do today and what I intend to do as well does harm a landowner who made a purchase based on something that was not clear. And our clarification may be very difficult for him. And so I express my personal sympathy to you for what that. I'm sorry that our lack of clarity causes you financial harm in this case, I fear.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. I think we're ready to proceed.
I'll motion to approve. Let's see here. The recommendation for a public recommendation to the City Council on city-initiated zoning text amendment to modify language within Chapter 19.37 NC Neighborhood Commercial, Project ZTA-25-001.
And we have a motion by Commissioner Simon,
Second.
a second by Commissioner Mills. Any deliberation about the motion? Okay, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Steinman,
Yes.
Commissioner Polson,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Shelton,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson, yes. Great, thank you. I'll close out that item. And before we proceed to the next item on the agenda, I have been very remiss in introducing our new commissioner, Rusty Lugo. Welcome. And my apologies, I did not do it sooner. I just dove right into business at hand, so my apologies.
That's what it's about.
So,
Thank you.
so welcome. We are excited to have you on the commission.
Good to
thank
be
you.
here.
Thank you. Okay, and as clarification, in case the public is wondering why I did not call on Commissioner Lugo for vote, he's considered an alternate and would vote if there was a member absent from the commission. So, wasn't ignoring you. All right, we'll move on to Project GPA 25-002, Moderate Income Housing Report, public hearing and potential recommendation to City Council on the draft Moderate Income Housing Report as required by Utah State Code.
I think I talked you to sleep in the work session on this. So again, I will give a brief overview.
And that's not true.
This is a state requirement. The Utah State Code requires that every city in the state of Utah adopt and report annually on a moderate income housing plan. Cities are required to choose from 26 very specific options and adopt those options for how they will try to assist in providing opportunities for moderate income housing. And then you have to adopt at least 3, but 5 for some priority funding preference in order to be compliant with state requirements. The report is submitted by August 1st every year. We're on, we're 5 years into our previous plan. So we are in front of you and then eventually the City Council to adopt a new plan, which will be submitted by August 1st. I went over some background on what is affordable housing, what is moderate income, some community statistics in the work session. Where this has to go on to the City Council, I certainly would encourage anyone to go review that. We also did have a discussion with the City Council on a lot of this data a month or so ago, and this will be back and presented to them again. For this meeting, though, I'll skip through that and just go to our recommended options. We are proposing 5 strategies, 4 of which are existing strategies from our previous report that we feel we're making good progress on, just given the circumstances of our city and the development that we see here. So the 5 here, again, directly from the state code, create or allow for and reduce regulations related to internal or detached accessory dwelling units in residential zones. Zone or rezone for higher density or moderate income residential development in commercial or mixed-use zones near major transit investment corridors, commercial centers, or employment centers. Implement zoning incentives for moderate income units in new developments. Demonstrate a utilization of a moderate income housing set-aside from Community Reinvestment Agency, Redevelopment Agency, or Community Development and Renewal Agency to create or subsidize moderate income housing. And 5, which is the new one, reduce, waive, or eliminate impact fees related to moderate income housing in the city. So we went through and the packet and the report and this presentation have the various implementation measures that we would pursue listed there. With ADUs, it's continuing to report and make sure public information is available so people know about that option for them. and then to really analyze the detached ADU standards to see if there's a better balance there between respecting privacy and property rights with maybe allowing a little more of an easy process to construct ADUs for those, for detached ADUs for those interested. And then one kind of creative idea that we think has some good merit is for the city to develop a card file system of pre-engineered plans for ADUs and even potentially small homes that would save people design and engineering costs if they were to pursue that option. Strategy F, allow residential density in commercial areas. We do this pretty well already. With the exception of one commercial zone, we allow to some extent family in every commercial zone in the city. We have our planned development district ordinance where we've entitled 2 projects that have over 600 entitled residential units between the 2 of them, and about 80 of which are deed restricted to affordable households in some way. In addition to that, we're developing and still in that process of presenting a form-based code along commercial areas to the city council, which would allow for residential housing. Our mixed-use ordinance has a permitted residential density right now of 35 units per acre, which is pretty generous in a commercial zone. And these are all the zoning and land use designations you'll find in our prime commercial areas. So we're well on our way there. Some goals here would be to make sure the residential development standards in each of these zones is incentivizing and allowing pathways to include housing within these commercial developments. And another one would be to, in the future, make sure that decisions outside of these developments, with infrastructure and right-of-way design and amenities there, are conducive to what users of residential and moderate income housing units would need for transportation, active transportation, things like that. Another strategy, zoning incentives for affordable units. Our planned development district does this. We allow a lot of development flexibility in certain areas in exchange for certain requirements to be met, one of which is the provision of deed restricted affordable units. Again, we've seen great success with that. We ought to continue doing that in those redevelopment areas. The gravel pit being the prime opportunity that we see coming in front of us, sometime in the near future. Continue to track development projects using these tools, and then above and beyond that, identify local financial options to further invest in affordable housing types. There are a lot of tools available from the state that can be created to hopefully partner with nonprofit, private groups, developers, and try to implement this. Moderate income housing set aside from community reinvestment areas. As a reminder, community reinvestment areas are created at the beginning of a new development, and then the growth and value in that development in terms of property tax value can then be reinvested. It's kept in that project area and reinvested into that area. Moderate income housing is a required set aside as you budget those areas. So the property value increases, some of that tax value gets reinvested back into the site, and then a portion of that is earmarked for affordable housing. We anticipate beginning negotiation with the various taxing entities for our town center CRA in the near future. That will require an affordable housing set aside in order to be considered. And then further down the road, potentially one at the gravel pit. We also have a few old kind of sunset project areas that we inherited when we became a city that include some leftover funding. And we are recommending a portion of that be earmarked for investment in affordable housing funds. And then lastly, waive or reduce impact fees for moderate income housing. The city has an ability to charge impact fees for new development projects. Historically, we've only assessed transportation and stormwater. Those impact fees have to be used in very specific ways to accommodate and offset the impact of the new growth on the new right-of-ways that are created, the new infrastructure that's needed to serve those projects. Cities in various areas have other impact fees, public safety, fire, park impact fees, et cetera. All of those have to be validated in a formal study before they can be collected. We're just recommending if the city pursues new impact fees or additional impact fees for these new growth areas like the gravel pit and others, that we include some options in there for either a waiver or reduction of impact fees as it relates to affordable housing units in those areas. A couple other options to note. Establishing a neighborhood improvement fund for some of our existing residents and existing households who may be income constrained, to provide some sort of subsidy or financial assistance for property maintenance, repairs, maintenance, and general improvement. Same thing with the 50/50 program. This allows the city to share in the cost of sidewalk repairs, curb and gutter repairs in front of properties, and we split that cost with homeowners. We could consider an expansion of that program. And then again, continuing to engage at all levels, all parties, to help alleviate the pressure that we're feeling with housing costs and housing affordability. So state, federal, government agencies, private development groups and landowners, nonprofit partners, et cetera. Any questions on this? Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I will go ahead and open up public comment period for this item. We had one form submitted by Mike Carey. I'd like to go ahead and come on up.
Hi, everyone. Mike Carey. I live on Old Coventry Circle over by Oakdale. I'm also, in the interest of full disclosure, I am the chair of the Salt Lake County Republican Party, recently elected. The reason that's relevant is part of the reason I got elected is because my experience, 25 years as a general contractor, delivering over $8 billion worth of work around the country, and moving here 14 years ago. You know, my life as an engineer, builder, and now a developer just in the last 6 months. I've seen a lot of things go on here that concern me, some of which are included in these recommendations. I'm from the East Coast originally. I lived in DC for 11 years before moving here 14 years ago. And some of the strategies we saw here are the same strategies that were implemented in Montgomery County, Maryland, when I was on the Department of Permitting Services Advisory Committee for 4 years. Specifically ADUs, okay? ADUs are a useful tool, but they don't solve the housing problem. I can tell you that because I lived it. Okay, what we saw in many parts of the county, especially the lower income neighborhoods, is they became boarding houses. All right, so even with the permitting and inspection, unless you have a cap on the number of units you're going to allow in the city, and you have very strict setback requirements for detached units, which they got rid of, it turns into, you wind up having multiple residences on single family lots. So just a cautionary tale. The other thing I'm against as a resident is getting rid of impact fees because on anything, okay? Because at the end of the day, we already don't collect impact fees on schools, okay? And we haven't since the late 90s. And part of that is that's part of the reason why our property taxes are so high. So even if we're just eliminating some modest impact fees, it's not going to, on just the moderately priced units, it's really not going to move the needle on sales price or development cost. It's just adding to the bottom line for developers like me. Some other things that I heard in the last session as well as I was listening in and the reason I printed all this stuff out and came down here 15 minutes before the meeting is because a lot of the data that's being pushed by the state, and I'm working with Steve Waldrop on these issues. I've met with him a couple times and communicated with him. I'm working with people in the legislature and Senator Cullimore, who's our Senate state senator. You know, the Utah First Homes Act allows for subsidies, first-time home buyer assistance on new construction only. Okay, why is that relevant? Well, because that's what the data says. We need more starter homes. Okay, well, the problem is that when you listen to Envision Utah, you listen to Wasatch Front Regional Council and all these other nonprofit entities around the state that are pushing for densification along the Wasatch Front, especially, what they're using data that was basically stopped being measured in second quarter of 2022. Okay, all of that data, if you look at all the footnotes, all of the endnotes to all of these reports, they go back to the Kem Gardner Institute report from September of 23.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else have comment about this agenda item? Okay. Seeing none, I will close the public comment period for this item. The next is, do we have any further deliberation we want or any further comments on this item?
Yeah, maybe some additional clarification, and this may be from Mike. So a lot of the requirements that are within the moderate income housing plan are going to then require deed restrictions in certain cases for developers to get the benefit of that. And with that deed restriction, we have a cap, and it was roughly, was it 50% AMI on that, or was it 80% AMI?
This plan does not require any of that. Our plan development district ordinance does. And it's a range, and that's why we have two projects at two different standards. If you provide units at 50% AMI, a smaller percentage of the total units have to be set aside for that. You can provide 80% AMI units, but a larger percentage of the total project needs to be set aside for that. So it ranges from 10% to 15% based on the affordability that a project sets.
And does that buy them extra density as well, or is it more so just the impact fee reduction?
I do want to also clarify, we do not, we have the ability to charge impact fees. We do not, because we don't have a lot of new growth, but we have, again, projects on the horizon that will create new growth and new impacts. So that would be a future visioning tool. The PDD on its own allows, for example, the gravel pit. The underlying land use vision for the gravel pit is mixed use. That allows 35-foot buildings, 35 units per acre density. Going through the legislative process and the PDD process allows 20 stories maximum if it's designed right and supported. No maximum density, really a ton of development flexibility. So that flexibility has a few trade-offs and guardrails in the PDD, the provision of affordable units being one of them. But I do want to clarify, that's the city's ordinance that we are using to report compliance on. No deed restrictions or anything like that are mandated in any of these strategies from the state code.
What is the threshold for us to kick impact fees into a development? Have we done impact fees?
You need to do a study to justify that you have projects that would qualify for impact fees.
So outside of the two impact fees that we charge typically, did we charge any additional impact fees?
Never have, no.
We never have.
No.
What does the process look like for us to table impact fees and get that back into place?
They are tabled right now. You would have to do a specific study related to whatever impact fee, in this case, the city council is interested in considering. Have a formal report done, presented publicly, and approved, and then implement the impact fees in a way that comply with that report.
And my understanding is that report and that study has to happen every 3 years. Is that correct?
That could be, I don't know offhand.
Okay. That might be something we should consider, especially, it sounds like it's already in consideration, but with these small little developments and certain impacts.
With a lot of our infill and redevelopment, like I said in the work session, impact fees cannot be used for maintenance of existing facilities. There's a lot of other guardrails on that. And if they're not spent within a certain time frame after collection, they are required to be returned. So that's why a lot of our infill development already had an impact in an area. Redevelopment of a property doesn't automatically create a new impact unless it's a drastic increase in development intensity.
Yeah, and I think in certain infill developments, if you're turning, a 4,000 square foot commercial building into 32 condo units, I think there would be a substantial impact. So.
Yeah, so we would need to have studies that support reimposing impact fees.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
I might add, especially because we're talking about a couple of properties that are not just, I think over, just talking about town center and simple redevelopment terms. That's I think that underestimates what the impact will be there, and the gravel pit as well. We've had that conversation. I would second that. Like in the revisiting the impact fee discussion. I realize it takes there's some work that will need to be done. I might tack that onto form-based code too, because if we're going to give license for some things along Fort Union Boulevard, this may be a critical funding piece as we see that start to materialize. So I'm not sure that it needs to be woven into form-based code, but as I kind of think about places where it might be needful, that strikes me.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful with redevelopments like the gravel pit and the Hillside Plaza for impact fees, just because they are in CRA zones. So we want to evoke that affordability or attainability within those spaces. And if we're adding additional fees to the developers, especially under bonds and grants, we have to be very careful with that. But of course, that's the council's purview. I think form-based code, I don't think we want to evoke any fees further into a code structure personally. I don't know of any communities that would do so. I think there would be more so of a table for impact fees based on density, based on true impact, whether it be a 2-unit development to a 40-unit development, especially in infill, and just make sure that we have the right calculations in place. And, there's a lot of great third parties that can do so. But I think ultimately with all of that, impact fees are a small piece of the moderate income housing plan. I think at the end of the day, what staff has done to modify this is pretty comfortable from my feeling from it. I know that a lot of cities and a lot of communities, they don't hold themselves to this, but I think there's a lot of added benefit that we can see from the moderate income housing plan, especially with, the different is it grants or is it bonds that we're receiving from this? What are the funds that we get by abiding to the moderate income housing plan?
Yeah, you don't get fined. It's more of a stick than a carrot. If you have 5 strategies, you have the potential to have priority access to a certain transportation investment fund, so road funding.
And I'm not advocating for taking it off the list. I just watch as we see density increasing in some of our adjacent municipalities, that some of the challenges for infrastructure, in about every utility, roads, schools, the ingress, egress, and that kind of chronic Utah problem of we don't hold a developer to have any real responsibility for 1 foot off of their property in any direction. So I think as we do it judiciously with these handful of big pieces, I want us to be ready to have the conversation, not for this piece, not for this plan, and not for right now. But I'm really grateful that you brought it up, and I appreciate the insights.
Yeah, we'll clarify to the public comment we got. None of these options on their own solve the problem. And I think you could implement all 26 options and you still wouldn't solve the problem. And it's not one that has an easy solution because everyone's still trying to figure that out. But, things we can do to try to ease the burden just a tiny bit.
Okay. Great. Any other comments or thoughts from commissioners?
I do have a thought about this. It seems like the state is imposing this on us, that we need to comply with this moderate income requirement to provide housing. I'm not sure exactly what the motivation is for the state to do that, other than to make sure we keep people moving into the state. And densification was a term that Mr. Carey used, and I think we see that going on all around us. I don't know what we can do to slow that down a little bit. It does make life less enjoyable than it once was when we weren't so densified. I guess there's a lot of big issues, and I think making housing affordable for people is a good cause. But I think there's another side of the equation that ought to be considered, probably by the state more than the Planning Commission, in my estimation. But a lot of things to consider.
If you looked at those numbers, affordability qualification is nearly $3,000 for a mortgage in Cottonwood Heights, which
that's a lot.
That's quite a bit. Yeah. So I think affordable is a really interesting statement in this. I think attainable is better used, where it's, I hope my kids will be able to attain housing in Cottonwood Heights, but I would guess it probably wouldn't be the situation. Making that kind of money here, it's difficult. And, densification I think is fascinating, just because growth and progress is hard. It's hard to see, but how do we do it thoughtfully and where do we do it? You know,
Yeah.
are we doing it on the west side of the valley? Are we doing it here? You know, Giverny, I think, is a perfect example of densification at the end of the day. And I feel like that was a thoughtful space for it. But how do we change kind of the mindset of affordable versus attainable and kind of grow from there? And you know, this is a statewide issue. We saw a 40% increase in values of properties between 2020 and 2022.
Right.
But I think to Mr. Carey's point, the data sets need to be more current. And, you know, when we're going off of a lot of this, you know, where are we at now? Where's the market at now? Where is everybody else? And also, where's the market going to be in the next 10 years? So it's a slow grind, it seems, but attainable housing is hard. It really is.
There's a lot to consider for sure. And I guess part of the thought I have is, what is our obligation as a community to provide affordable housing? And I believe we have some, but I wonder also, does Beverly Hills have the same responsibility to provide affordable housing in that environment? And I think people would say, well, no, that's not our problem. I don't know. I just philosophically wonder how far we want to go with this.
Yeah. And it's definitely an interesting thought. And I think, you know, you start looking at services, you know, if you look at Summit County, it's a perfect example. And
Right.
60% AMI in Summit County, you know, that is engineers that are making $160,000 a year as engineers up in Summit County. And they can't even afford a 60% AMI project that's deed restricted up there.
Right.
So you start looking at the services from engineers to nurses to teachers, and where are the teachers living? Where are the nurses living? And, you know, it's forward thinking of being able to understand where we're going and how we're doing it. I don't think we have necessarily the solution yet, but I think, you know, these are some of the necessary steps to look at it.
Right, that's what I was going to say, is that we're taking the steps and being very thoughtful about it.
And to that sentiment as well, as ADUs, I think are interesting. I think there's more study that needs to be done on ADUs before we change that ordinance, and I think the council is going to be focusing on that heavily. But ADUs, my worry with ADUs is it could turn into glorified short-term rental land. But you know, density or thoughtful density. Let's use the word thoughtful density, I think, is something that we need to think about. And, you know, where can we find that? And is ADU an option for more thoughtful density where, you know, previously a duplex could be built there or a fourplex or something like that? And, you know, figuring out ways that we can, once again, find more attainability.
Mike, how many ADU applications have we had since the ordinance?
15, maybe, something like that.
External,
All total.
all total.
I think 15 is pretty small.
How many
mean,
are
it's hard to get
operating
really-
out there? Probably a higher number than that didn't go through the licensure process, but 15 to 20 have come and gotten licenses.
I think at 15, I'm not hitting the panic button yet. And I'm sensitive to the fact that we don't want to run towards maxing it out and just letting it go unfettered. But I'm confident that as we craft this a little bit, we can open the spigot very, very ever so slightly, and it's not going to be chaos. So thank you for presenting it the way you did. And I think more thoughtful conversation, you know, between us and I'm sure among our council that there are solutions that we're just scratching the surface of. So I'm very supportive of all 5 of these recommendations.
Okay. If no further comments on that segue, if you will, Commissioner Mills, but if there's no further comments, we can go ahead and have a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept the proposals as outlined by Mr. Johnson regarding the, I don't have the thing up there to refer to, but
And you can make a motion if you'd like, Mike.
yeah, go ahead, Dan.
I move to forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for project GPA-25-002 and updated moderate income housing plan and report pursuant to Utah State Code reporting requirements.
Great. We have a motion by Commissioner Mills.
And I will second that.
Okay, second by Commissioner Smith. Any further deliberation about the motion? Okay, seeing none, we will do a vote. Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Shelton,
Yes.
Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Polson,
Yes.
Commissioner Steinman,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson, yes. Great, thank you. The final item on the agenda for tonight is the consent agenda for May 7, 2025 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Is there any feedback in reviewing those minutes? Okay. Seeing none, we can have a motion.
Motion for the approval of consent agenda of May 7th, 2025 Planning Commission minutes.
Great, motion by Commissioner Steinman,
I'll second it.
Commissioner Polson, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, one final motion.
Was this me? I move that we adjourn.
Commissioner- Okay, Commissioner Smith and Commissioner Shelton, thank you very much. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Next meeting is July 2nd.